Now that we've figured out how to add and subtract inequalities, let's do it with word problems. So, on the other side, you should have this paper glued in. It's a fold and glue. You're not cutting it, you're folding and gluing it. So, in order to solve word problems, follow the same steps that you use for equations. Pretty self-explanatory. So, first thing we do, find the important information and the key words. Second thing, define the variable. Remember, if k is equal to keys, tell me that. Third thing, model the situation with an inequality. Be careful with the sign. Pay attention to that, please. Number 4, you're going to solve. And then number 5, you're going to check to make sure that your answer is logical. Does it make sense? Does it make sense? Okay. So number 1. Jack has to write a minimum of 500 words for his essay. So far, he has completed 312 words. Write and solve an inequality to determine how many more words Jack needs to write for his essay. Well, we're talking about words, okay? So I'm going to do, my variable is W for words. Now, the reason I circled the word minimum, this is an important word. So, a minimum of something. So, a minimum means you could have more than that. That's just the smallest requirement. So, Jack has to have at least 500 words for his essay. He could have 600. He could have 501. But is he allowed to have 499? He is not. He needs to have at least, or a minimum of 500 words. And if you need a refresher on what those specific words are, look back to yesterday's lesson. We wrote those key words down for you in your notes. We took those as notes. All right, so just like with everything else, so far he has completed 312 words. So 312 words is already what he has. How many more does he need? That tells me to add. I'm going to see how many more words he needs. Now, I know that we're used to doing equals, but this is not an equation. This is an inequality. He needs to have at least 500, or a minimum of 500. That means it could be greater than. It could be greater than, or it could be equal to. And it could be 500. So he needs to have 500 or more. Now, to solve this, in order to solve this, we are going to take our equation, find my variable, draw my line. 312. That's a positive number, so I need to move it to the other side. And I do that by subtracting. Oops, I wrote that backwards. I do that by subtracting 312. So 312 on both sides. Okay, bring down my variable. W is greater than or equal to 500 minus 312. Well, I need to borrow. 10 minus 2 is 8. 9 minus 1 is 8. 4 minus 3 is 1. So, W is W is greater than or equal to 188 words. So that means he needs at least 188 words. At least. That means he could have more than 188 words, but he cannot have less than 188 words additional. Okay? Great job. Moving on to number 2. Number 2. The school bus holds 45 students. Currently, there are 36 students on the bus. Write and solve an inequality to find out how many more students can fit on the bus. Well, we're talking about students. So my variable is going to be S for students. I'm going to try to make my S not look like a 5. Currently there are 36 students. How many more? Well, that tells me I need to add. And I need to add my students. And it needs to hold 45. Now I have a question for you. Can it hold more than 45? No, that's the most it could hold. So if it holds the most of 45, That means I need to have less than or equal to 45 students on that bus. I can't hold 46, but I can hold 40, 44, 10. I can hold less than that. So now I have to figure out how to solve. Draw my line, find my variable. Positive 36. So I need to subtract 36 from both sides. Cross that out, bring down my variable. 45 minus 36, I have to borrow. 15 minus 6 is 9. So, students is less than or equal to 9. So this means that it is at most 9 students. Okay, at most 9 students. Because if I add more than 9, I'll be over 45 and there won't be seats for them. So at the most is I have 45 students. All right, we got 2 more. Moving on to number 3. Jasmine raised $350 for charity. The club gave a portion of the money to the women's shelter and now have less than $100 left. Write and solve an inequality to find the amount of money Jasmine's club gave to the women's shelter. The amount of money that they gave to the women's shelter. Well, we're talking about money, okay? So I'm going to have M be my variable for money. Okay, well, how much did she start with? She raised $350, right? And they gave a portion. Gave. When you give somebody something, you no longer have it, so you are subtracting that money. They have less than. Well, what does less than mean? It means less than. They have less than $100 left. Now we need to figure out how much they gave. So again, model the situation. This inequality equation models a situation. It does not tell me how to solve it. It models the situation. The book needs to match the movie. So I'm going to draw my line, circle my variable. I'm circling the minus m because the sign in front is connected to the variable. I'm going to subtract $350. Subtract $350 from both sides because it's a positive 350. I'm going to bring down my minus m because the negative sign is part of that variable. Negative m. 100 minus 350 gets me a negative $250. Now, I have a negative variable. Do you remember way back when we were doing equations and we talked about how you cannot have a negative variable and how there's an imaginary 1 between my negative sign and my variable? Well, same thing applies here. Just because it's an inequality doesn't mean it's different. So how would I get rid of that negative 1 coefficient? I would do it how I do everything else. I'm going to divide both sides by a negative 1. Divide both sides by a negative 1. Bring down my m. Now, one thing that I want you to pay attention to that we will go into more tomorrow is I'm going to flip this inequality. Today, just do it. So instead of it being less than, now it's going to be greater than. Just do it today. Tomorrow we will explain it. I know it's a little backwards, but just bear with us. Negative 250 divided by a negative 1 gets me a positive 250. So m is greater than $250. So they gave more than $250 to the charity. All right, moving on to number 4. Last one. Rachel is 42 inches tall. Riders must be at least 54 inches to ride the roller coaster. Write and solve an inequality to see how many more inches Rachel must grow in order to ride the roller coaster. Well, I is going to equal inches. My inequality. Right now she is 42 inches tall. We're trying to see how many more inches she needs to be to ride the ride. At least. Greater than or less, or greater than or equal to. She could be more than 40. She could be more than 54 inches. You just have to be 54 inches or taller. Okay, so now let's find the variable, draw the line, and solve. Positive 42, so I'm going to subtract 42 from both sides. Bring down my variable. I is greater than or equal to 54 minus 42. Well, 4 minus 2 is 2. 5 minus 4 is 1. So she needs to grow at least 12 inches. Now, go to the inside. Guided practice is on the next assignment.